Us Catholics need to be thinking about ourselves in a new way.
Does it feel sometimes like you're losing the battle and life is a disappointment?
We've got to have the courage to say that there's something missing.
The Lord is interested in giving to us His power so that we can live a new way of life.
What are we called to be? We're called to be saints and missionaries. There's something in us after meeting Christ that makes us want to tell others.
The Lord wants to speak through you and use you and stir you.
This universal call to mission is a revolution.
As we hear the Spirit, He recreates us and we become new people.
This is it. This is all what it's all about.
Hello, my name is Ralph Martin, and it's my privilege week after week to be with you on this program called The Choices We Face, and to reveal to you by our guests and through our videos and through so many different ways that even though sometimes when you look at the headlines you say there's just bad news out there, there's incredibly good news happening all the time. Christ is at work. He's alive. He's working in people's minds and hearts. And today we're going to have a chance to hear about how Jesus Christ worked in the life of somebody called Debbie Herbeck. Welcome, Debbie.
Thanks, Ralph. Good to be here.
Yeah. Debbie, as you may know from her last name, is the wife of Peter Herbeck, who's often our co-host. But we told Peter we didn't need him today. We wanted Debbie. And besides being Peter's wife and the mother of 4 children, she's also the editor of our Renewal Ministries newsletter, and she's been working as our TV producer, and she's just had a life of dedicated service to young women, reaching out to them and helping them through Bible studies and other ways. And Debbie, it's great to have you here.
Thanks. I'd rather be behind the camera than in front of it, but I'm glad to be here.
Well, good. And I wonder if you'd be willing just to share how the Lord has worked in your life, because I think it's just so inspiring to see what the Lord has done with you. Let's start at the beginning. You were born.
Okay, I was born. Well, settle in. It's kind of a long story, but I was born, and I was born and raised in a Jewish home, and one of my earliest memories was celebrating the Passover with my family, and I bring it up because the whole central idea around the Passover is that you're supposed to tell and retell the story, and it's the story of the deliverance of the Israelites from Egypt. And it's not just a story that we tell every year that happened to people a long time ago, but it's supposed to be a story that we retell because it's our story. And as I sit here and think about telling you my story, it's really something, I grew up with a heritage that really focused on tell your story, tell the story of God's deliverance and how God has rescued you and freed you. So whenever I share my testimony or my story with people, I really like to put it in those terms because it's not only my story of deliverance, it's everyone's story of deliverance and how God wants to work. So yes, it began when I was born, and I was born as an identical twin sister to a family of 4, and we lived in the Chicago area. And I was raised as a Jew, and even at a young age, I thought everyone in the world was Jewish. And maybe
Really like a Jewish area, yeah.
Very Jewish area.
I grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey, which was a very Jewish area too.
Yeah.
Oh,
So maybe you thought everyone in the world was Jewish.
It seemed like
in
that,
the minority.
yeah.
Yes, but all of our family friends were Jewish. Our neighborhood was Jewish. The kids I went to school with were Jewish. I was raised with religious education, so we were going to synagogue on Saturdays. I was taking, when I got old enough, began to take Hebrew classes during the week. And so my whole life, and it was a very wonderful life, was surrounded with people that loved me and growing up with a strong cultural Jewish identity. My dad's parents, my grandparents, were very involved in helping Israel become a state. And so by the time I came along, Israel had already been a state, but they had these incredible relationships with all these people that were very interconnected. My grandmother was the president of Hadassah, which is a very well-known Jewish charitable organization in Chicago, all over the world, but in Chicago. And so she and my grandfather worked tirelessly to raise thousands of dollars to go towards the state of Israel. So my life as a young person, was just filled with memories of being at my grandparents' house and seeing photos of them on the wall with the heroes of the modern heroes of Israel, like Golda Meir and
David
Yitzhak
Ben-Gurion,
Rabin, all those people. And so that's kind of the environment that I grew up in. I had a very, very strong cultural identity as a Jew. At 13, my sister Dana and I, my identical twin sister, were bat mitzvahed together, which is a rite of passage similar to confirmation, or parallel to confirmation, in that you stand up and you chant a portion out of the Torah, out of the Bible, and you're saying to the congregation, I'm ready now to be an adult member of the congregation.
Yeah, you know, my wife Ann just went to a bat mitzvah. One of her cousins is a Jew, and she said it was so moving at the bat mitzvah ceremony when they brought the Torah around and people were touching it and kissing it and just sort of like reverencing the Word of God as they knew it. And,
yeah, it really is a beautiful thing, and really considered an honor to be able to get up there at that age and chant something out of it, and then describe what that portion of the Torah means to you. And then, of course, you have a big party and you celebrate. But I remember after my bat mitzvah, my sister and I kind of connived together, and we went to my dad and we said, so we're done, right? That's it.
We don't have to go to Hebrew school anymore.
Exactly.
We're
still Jewish, but we don't have to, like on Saturdays, we want to be in the mall, or we want to be out playing soccer with our friends. We don't want to be in synagogue. And he said, no, you're not done. And we said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, you're a Jew, and we go to synagogue because my father went to synagogue, and he went because his father went, and his father went because his father went. Like in Fiddler on the Roof, did you ever see that movie where they talk about tradition?
Yeah.
And so we had a very strong sense of this is something that you carry on with you throughout your life, and it's important as a people to maintain our identity. So that stuck with me, and even though I didn't experience God in any personal way, I knew that there was something really valuable about this tradition and this heritage that I had. But as I got into the teenage years,
and this was the same upbringing that Jesus had.
yeah, it was. I didn't know that at the time,
raised, right?
but I didn't know that at the time, or even appreciate it really at the time. But it was certainly there as a foundation for my life, the reverence of the scriptures. But I would say also what was happening, you know, I was a young woman being raised in the 70s, and God just wasn't very relevant for my life. I didn't really see a need for him. He didn't seem personal to me. I just connected him more with my heritage and with the stories of the Old Testament, which now at this point in my life as a teenager, I was beginning to say, did that stuff really happen?
Sure. Yeah.
Is that really true? It doesn't, you know, it doesn't really relate to my life personally. And so while I had a strong cultural identity, the way I lived my everyday life, God was not really a very significant part of it at all. So
yeah, it was like you were being raised in continuity with your people,
right,
and the ceremonies and the memories and the reverence, but the current relevance of it wasn't making the connection. Yeah.
Exactly, and there's nothing that could separate me from that identity. It was what I was born with. It was who I was.
Sure.
But yeah, I would go to synagogue on Saturdays, and everything would be in Hebrew, and even though I knew all the prayers by heart, I would sit there and say, where's God?
You know, and the same is true so many times for people being raised in like the Catholic tradition. You know,
right.
They hear the stories, they, you know the history, they hear the Bible stories, but in terms of the present relevance, well, what happened?
Well, what happened? Well, when I was 15, I was a sophomore in high school, and my sister and I were invited on a family vacation with some cousins and an aunt and uncle in the Bahamas. And my brother Mark at this point was now a freshman in college. He was 2 years older than we were. And the plan was that my sister and I would fly to Florida, and my brother Mark, who had a final, this was in December, who had a final, would drive and meet us at a later flight in Florida. And my parents were not going to be going with us. So when Dana and I got to the airport in Florida, instead of going to our next gate to wait for my brother, some family friends were at the gate waiting for us. And they said, your brother Mark has been in a car accident on his way home from school, and we don't really know how serious it is, but your parents have asked us to bring you back to our home and just to wait to see what the plans will be. So we went back to their home, and I remember, you know, there's just some things you remember so vividly
Sure.
as if they just happened. I remember standing in their yard. They had a swimming pool, and it was the nighttime. And I remember standing by the pool, and I remember praying for the first time in my life. Now, I had said thousands of prayers in Hebrew throughout my life, but I remember really praying as if I was reaching out to God. I remember saying to God, I don't know what's wrong with my brother, but if you're really God, and if you really care about our family, if you're really there, God, save my brother's life. And the image I had as I was standing by that pool was like taking that prayer and just kind of throwing it out into the deep end of that pool. And then probably a minute or two after I prayed that prayer, the phone rang inside the house. And I saw my mom's friend pick up the phone, and I could just tell by the expression on her face that my brother Mark had died. And it was as if I watched the prayer that I had prayed just sink to the bottom of the pool. And in my heart and in my mind, I was saying to God, you don't care. You're not real. You don't love me. None of this is true. And at that point, I made a very dangerous conclusion in my mind, and that was, if God really isn't there, I can do whatever I want. And I was, you know, understandably angry and upset, but it was really a turning point for me in my whole perspective on my life. And my sister Dana and I got on a plane the very next morning and went back to begin the whole custom and tradition of mourning the loss of a loved one, mourning my parents' firstborn son. My brother Mark had been on his way back from college. He was driving his car in a snowstorm on a 2-lane highway and was run off the road by a semi-truck and was not wearing a seatbelt. And by the time my parents were able to get to the small hospital that he was in, he had passed away. And so here we were as a family trying to deal with this reality, and my parents understandably didn't have the emotional reserve to help us kids figure it out. It was my sister and I and a younger brother, David. And so I remember those first weeks and days, our house was filled with people. And the Jewish customs and traditions, they have, it's called sitting Shiva, and they actually have people come to your house for days upon days to pray with you, to offer comfort and support. And I remember going around and talking to different people and saying, people I respected and people that I knew loved me, and I would say, where is my brother? Where do you go when you die? How could God allow something so horrible to happen? I never had a chance to say goodbye. All those questions that come to mind, talking to teachers or relatives, and no one could give me any answers.
So many people have those questions.
Finally, I got sent to the rabbi. He was kind of the end of the line. And I remember sitting down with him and asking him those similar questions. And he just kind of shook his head and he said, kind of like, it's a mystery. I don't really know what to tell you. But I remember he said, I'll pray that you'll find the answers that you're looking for. And I remember just feeling supremely disappointed.
Like, is that all there is?
This is it? This is all there is? You live this short life?
Can't anybody say anything more than that?
And I was seeking, and there was just nothing there for me. So, you know, at 15, almost 16, I kind of made this internal decision that I'm just going to go for the gusto. I'm going to live my life, get everything I can out of it, because you just don't know when your last day will be. But I also want to make my life count for something. I want to make my mark on the world. I want to get a good education and go to a good school and really do something with my life, something that perhaps my brother never had the opportunity to do.
Good. Well, Debbie, we're going to take a little break right now, but I know we're getting to the really exciting part of the story, so we'll be right back.
There was no single event. It was more gradual. You know, eventually you don't go one Sunday and then you don't go 2 Sundays in a row. Then went through a divorce and ended up being a single parent. If I didn't have church or God, I would be back at that lonely stage, that trouble stage. Whenever you get anxious and worry about things, you just know that Jesus has it under control.
If you've been away from the Catholic Church for any reason, visit CatholicsComeHome.org.
Welcome back. We're talking to Debbie Herbeck, who is our newsletter editor and works in TV production, and Peter Herbeck's wife, who's often sitting in that chair, but we said we didn't need him today. We wanted Debbie. And Debbie's just telling us this amazing, wonderful story about being raised in a Jewish family and running into a tragedy in her life with her brother dying and asking questions and not finding answers and about ready to leave for the university. So let's continue the story.
Okay. Well, I'm going to the University of Michigan now, and I don't know, well, now I know why I went there, but at the time I just had this burning desire to go there. It was one of the only schools I applied to, and as it turned out, my identical twin sister and I ended up going to different schools. So for the first time in our life, we were apart, and I just felt like I needed to go to the University of Michigan. I didn't have any other friends going there, but I went off and I thought, well, I'll just kind of start my life afresh, and there's lots of Jewish people at U of M, and I'll just meet some of the Jews there and kind of make my own life. And so I got to the university and immediately got to my dorm and got on my floor and started just before I even checked into my room, I walked up and down the hall, and it was a freshman hallway, so they had all the girls' names up on the doors, and I started walking down the hall and looking for Jewish names.
Yeah.
And I suddenly realized that as far as I could tell, there were no Jewish girls living on my hallway. So here I am. I had been raised in this Jewish home, and really, Ralph, had very little exposure to Christianity. I knew it was a major world religion. I knew that Jesus was like the head of it, if you want, or the founder of it.
Why don't you tell them what your maiden name was?
Rosenstein.
That's
so
good.
Deborah Ann Rosenstein.
Yeah, good.
So I really had I'd never read the New Testament. I had no real concept of what Christianity taught. I knew
you knew it was there, but you
there.
didn't really know what it was
yes,
about. Yeah.
I knew I was a Jew and there were the Gentiles,
yeah.
but I didn't really know that much about Christianity. And so I got to my dorm room, and my roommate had already moved in because she was from Michigan. I didn't know her, and her name was Lori Brown. And I thought, well, she's definitely not Jewish. That's not a Jewish name. And she had had a room set up already, and I remember I was moving my stuff in, and she was making conversation with me. And I remember, and I tell this story because it really shows my ignorance of Christianity, although it is a little bit embarrassing. I remember going over to her dresser, and she had this picture of this guy with and this was in the 70s, with long brown hair and a beard and these warm brown eyes. And I remember going up to her and saying, oh, who's that guy? He's kind of cute. Is that your boyfriend? And this is the picture here.
Oh, yeah, yeah. One of the famous depictions of contemporary depictions of Jesus,
yes.
yeah.
And I remember she looked at me, and I think probably what was going through her mind is, you got into school here?
Yeah.
Where are you from?
Yeah.
She looked at me, but she's very quick on her feet. She said, no, that's Jesus. And then she said, oh, and by the way, he is my boyfriend.
Wow.
And I kind of thought, okay.
Yeah, what's
You're weird.
Yeah.
Well, as it turned out, I found out later, she was Catholic, had been raised in a Catholic home, and the summer before she came to school was really renewed in her Catholic faith, had gone through a Life in the Spirit seminar, and was really coming to the university, really wanting to be a serious Catholic. Mm-hmm. And that's who I got matched up with.
Wow, that's something.
Yeah, it was. It was incredible.
Isn't it something how the Lord can work in your heart by giving you this feeling like you need to be someplace, you need to go someplace, and you don't even know it's the Lord. It's just this desire in you, and it's something that the Lord is using to get you someplace where he has something special for you.
Definitely, definitely. And so Lori was very wise. She knew that we had to coexist in this tiny little dorm room together for the year, so she didn't really talk a lot about her faith, although I feel like she really did try and live it. But there was another girl on my floor who talked constantly about her faith. And her name was Sarah. And she played the guitar, and she used to walk up and down the hallway with her guitar and sing and talk about God. And,
wow.
And she was very outgoing and fun. And I thought she was kind of crazy, but there's something about her that really was attractive to me, too, just the freedom that she had to express what she really believed in. And so we had nothing in common except that we both liked sports and we both liked to work out. So we became friends and started going to the gym together, and she started to try and share with me her faith. And I made it pretty clear to her that I wasn't interested, and I wasn't interested in converting. And she wasn't very systematic in her approach to her evangelization attempts. So she never sat down and actually said, do you know who Jesus is? Let me tell you about Jesus. We'd get into these debates where she would just kind of say things from the New Testament, and I would say things from the Old Testament, and I don't think either of us really knew exactly what we were talking about, but we'd kind of go back and forth. And we just developed a friendship. And like I said, there was something about her that really drew me. Well, about 2 months into my freshman year, I was taking a book called A Great Books class at Michigan, and the professor said one day, we were reading 1st and 2nd century sources, and he said, I'd like you to read the book of Romans and to do an essay on it. So I remember I went up to him afterwards and I said, well, I didn't buy the book of Romans. And he said, it's in the New Testament. And I said, well, I'm not allowed to have one of those. And he said, well, find one and do the assignment. So I wasn't about to buy a New Testament. So I thought, who do I know that might have the Christian Bible? So I went down to my friend Sarah's room and I knocked on her door and I said, I have this assignment to do and I need to read the book of Romans. And she said, I can help you. And so she pulled out her Bible, and this is actually the Bible that she had here. And she pulled it out and she said, let me show you exactly where the book of Romans is. It's in the back in the New Testament. And she put a little red ribbon in it and she said, but let me just warn you, it's a really hard book. Like, a lot of Christians don't even understand it. So if you need help, I'd be glad to help you with it. So I took her Bible back to my room and I started reading the book of Romans, and she was right. I could not understand anything about what was being said. And so I kind of gave up on the book of Romans, but I started kind of leafing through her Bible because
I see how underlined it is.
Yeah, you can tell it's very underlined. I had never met anyone who actually owned their own Bible. As you mentioned earlier in the show, Jews really reverence the Word of God and the Scriptures, so much so that no one would actually have their own Bible, and you would never, ever write in the Scriptures. Right. In Jewish custom, if you would have a Bible or Scripture and it would fall to the ground, you would need to pick it up and kiss it as a sign of reverence and respect for the Word. So here I am, I'm seeing someone who actually owns their own Bible. It's obviously well-read and well-worn. She's underlined almost the whole New Testament, and then she's written in the margins comments about things that she's reading. And then she runs out of space, and so she goes to the back of the Bible and she writes all over the thing, the back and the front. And I'm sitting here, Ralph, reading her comments, and I'm thinking, this book actually speaks to her. And then, strangely enough, she talks back to it. And I thought these words were just ancient words that were made up for us to know more about God. I didn't think that there was anything to them. And she actually is living her life according to these words, and they're forming who she is as a person.
You know, Debbie, I know there's so much more for you to say, but we only have like 3 minutes left, and I don't want to end this program without you completing this phase of story, but we hope you can come back next week and continue.
Yes, well, I'll move on then. So I gave her Bible back to her and said, thanks, but no thanks. And it was the beginning of God beginning to show me more of himself. And then I continued my friendship and my relationship with Sarah throughout the year. And about February of that year, some of the girls knocked on my door, including Sarah, and said, hey, want to take a study break? We're watching a movie in the lounge. And so I went down to the lounge with them, and it was crowded, and I sat down on the floor, and a movie came on. And I turned to my friend Sarah and said, what is this movie? And she said, oh, it's nothing. And I said, what's this movie? And she said, oh, it's called Jesus of Nazareth. And everything in me wanted to get up and leave the room because I felt like I don't want to see this stuff. But I stayed and I watched it, and I watched Jesus' life begin to unfold. And the very first thing that struck me as I watched it was, this guy is Jewish. Jesus was a Jew. I never knew that. Jesus was a Jew. And not only was he a Jew, he was a good Jew. He kept the law. He seemed to fulfill the law perfectly. He listened to his mother. He was a good Jewish boy.
Yeah, Mary was a good Jewish mother.
Yes, and so instantly I felt a connection there with him and his humanity. And then a scene unfolded in the movie where Jesus comes to a town, and there's 2 sisters there, Martha and Mary, and they're weeping, and they're saying, Jesus, if you had been here, our brother Lazarus would not have died.
Yeah.
And I sat there watching that and felt like a sword was piercing my heart. And I wanted to, everything in me wanted to get up and leave the room, because I just felt like I'd just gone through that with my own brother. But I stayed and I watched as that story unfolded, and Jesus calls forth Lazarus from the tomb and raises him from the dead. And as I sat there and I watched that movie, I thought, what if it's true? What if this man has power over death? What if death isn't the final answer? What if he really is the Messiah?
Well, those are the questions. Yeah.
So I went back to my room that night. The movie ended there. I couldn't sleep, and I went down to my friend Sarah's room, and the door opened this wide, and she handed the Bible out. And that's when the real confrontation with the Lord began. So if you like, would you like me to continue, or should I wait and go to the next program?
Well, you know what? I want to hear more. I think everybody wants to hear more, but we are running out of time for today. Could you come back next week
Sure.
and complete the story?
Sure.
But obviously, you and the Lord are about to meet each other. Yeah, that's really exciting. And you know what? You know, Debbie was asking all the right questions. You know, what happens after death? You know, is there any hope? You know, could somebody actually raise somebody from the dead? And of course, the answers to those questions are given to the human race by God the Father in sending us His Son, Jesus. You know, the answer to the questions that Debbie had, the answer to the questions that you have, are all contained in Jesus. Jesus is the answer to the huge questions and the huge anxiety and agony that the human race experiences. He really is the hope of our race. He is our personal hope. And we here at Renewal Ministries have written this booklet. It's called Is There Any Hope for Me? And we'd like to make it available to you at no cost, just for the asking. If you call the 800 number or write to the address on the screen or go to our website, we'd be happy to send it to you, because there are answers to these questions. There is hope for the human race, and there is hope for you, and it's in Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth. Until next week, this is Ralph Martin, Debbie Herbeck, wishing you the very best, a life filled with hope, a life filled with Jesus. And don't miss next week's program, where we hear the rest of the story.